So I can't really sleep at the moment, so why not upload a video? That's what I've been thinking. I've been browsing a number of articles on a controversial pickup artist, a guy called Julian Blanc. He's an American pickup artist. He's a very controversial figure, and there is calls to ban him in the UK. I might make a video specifically about that guy and his videos, because I've got some thoughts on it, but rather I'll make this specifically about the issue of some anti-feminists and why I think their attitude and their approach doesn't really help anyone. Now, I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who is not a feminist. I've made that quite clear, and I've made a lot of videos very critical of feminism. However, I don't necessarily describe myself as anti-feminist, because I'm not opposed to all forms of feminism. There's parts of the world, I've said this before, where I believe that specific women's rights movements are needed. And I'm not, in that sense, I'm not anti-feminist. Apologies, a bit of a toothache at the moment. It's really playing up right now. But anyway, I am very, very critical of Western feminism, and I've made plenty of videos talking about why I think it's full of double standards, hypocrisy, etc., etc. I'm not going to go over all that in this video because it's going to detract from the main issue I want to talk about. But just to be very clear from the outset, I am not a feminist. So if any guys want to come on here and call me a white knight or something like that, I'm making this clear now. I'm not a feminist. Okay? I do not identify myself as a feminist, and I'm very, very critical of Western feminism. However, there has been something that I've noticed among some anti-feminists. There is unquestionably a misogyny among them, some of these guys. When you get guys who really don't think that there's any problem with rape, and I'm talking about actual rape, I'm not talking about grey areas where how do we define if it is rape. I'm talking about clear-cut cases of rape. I'm talking about some guys who really do have a very disrespectful attitude towards women in general, and everything they say has to have a sexual context, or basically these are just guys who don't respect women. And you don't need to look very hard before you find some of these sort of attitudes online. And what irritates me about them is they sort of assume the mantle of being anti-feminists, which then sends out the message that everyone critical of feminism, every man critical of feminism, has the same attitude. So actually it damages the wider anti-feminist movement, or I should say the wider movement that is critical of feminism. Because anti-feminism and critique of feminism is not exactly the same thing. I am critical of feminism, I'm not an anti-feminist per se. I'm not a feminist either, but the point I'm trying to make here is you do not counter the hypocrisy and the double standards and the misandry of feminism by just being a misogynist. That is not the way to go about it, because that only goes into their hands and it only validates some of the points they are making. And the truth is, those of us who are critical of feminism need to acknowledge there are certain issues that impact women, and there is such things as sexual harassment, and there is such things as rape, and these are serious problems. I have a close female friend who recently got sexually harassed by her boss. This was in China, I should say, but it's a worldwide problem. And you know, she's a close friend of mine. I've known her for years. She's not the sort of girl to sort of be overly emotional or make something up. So women shouldn't have to put up with that. And just because you're critical of feminism doesn't mean that you know, one problem I have is some of those who are very critical of feminism or anti-feminist actually seem to think that things are perfect for women and women never face issues. Just because there are men's issues that feminists tend to ignore doesn't mean that there aren't women's issues, because there are. I think any open-minded, fair-minded person would recognise that there are issues that impact men, but there are also many issues that impact women. And the problem with some anti-feminists is they go so far in their opposition to feminism that they go to the point of making out that all women have a perfect life, and they sort of have the notion of female privilege. What I mean by that is they really do believe that because the feminist movement is so vocal, then there's this giant conspiracy against all men, and they go beyond just feminism. Then they start. I mean, I've spoken before about how I've had altercations with extreme men's rights activists who basically just hate all women. I came across one guy who was slandering all women because he'd had a bad experience with his ex-wife. I believe it was a child custody case, which always brings about raw emotions. Now, I responded to that guy and I said, look, I can understand you hating your ex-wife, and you've every right to be angry because the system is biased against men. But I took issue with him slandering all women because some of my best friends are women. Some of the people I care most about are women. I probably have more female friends than male friends. I'm not just saying this is just a fact. So when guys come out with that sort of crap, it does offend me because you don't win any argument by slandering half of humanity, and that is precisely why the feminist movement has been so controversial in recent years, because that's what it constantly does. It constantly slanders half of humanity, men. But the problem is some anti-feminists, especially some male anti-feminists, just seem to be anti-women. So if you're going to oppose feminism, you also have some responsibility to show that you do oppose issues that women face, i.e. you do oppose sexist issues. So a creep like Julian Blank, and from what I've seen of the guy, I've no time for him, those of us who are critical of feminism need to acknowledge that there are people out there like Julian Blank who are a problem, and who do display genuinely misogynistic attitudes. Let's not gloss it over, let's not pretend it's a little thing, because these attitudes, okay, maybe a lot of guys following his seminars won't go out and do that exactly, but nevertheless, it's the same argument I would make about the chef Gordon Ramsay. I've argued that he promotes a culture of bullying. Well, the truth is, if you have someone with certain attitudes, they promote those sort of attitudes as being the norm. Now, what Julian Blank promotes, people may say it's harmless, but I do agree with those who say that he has a misogynistic attitude. And if that means I'm on the same side with feminists on this one, so be it. That's not deliberate, it's just my opinion. I'm still very critical of feminism. I'm not a feminist, but I just think that anti-feminists sometimes are their own worst enemies. They complain that they aren't given a level playing field, but sometimes they don't really do themselves any favours in terms of how they come across. So what I would say is, people who are critical of feminism, I completely understand those arguments, because I have those arguments as well. However, I always try to balance it out by acknowledging that there are many women's issues in the world that need to be addressed, and if you're a decent man, if you're a decent human being, you would acknowledge those issues exist. Number two, misogyny does exist. Let's not pretend that it doesn't exist, because there are some attitudes out there that are misogynistic. I don't think it is as much as, I mean, of course feminists are going to cherry pick, and they're going to focus on someone like Julian Blank and say it's the whole situation. And that's the problem I have with the feminist movement, they cherry pick. However, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And just because feminists might distort statistics on certain things, doesn't mean that problems like sexual harassment and rape aren't a problem. In the end of the day, there are some scumbags out there who do treat women badly. And anti-feminists need to acknowledge that. Just as there are some women who treat men really badly, there are some men who treat women really badly, and we should condemn them. You see, the problem is not speaking out in those sort of issues will only buy us into the feminist hands, because then they'll turn around and say, oh, misogyny isn't taken seriously, rape isn't taken seriously. And I hate to say it, but they would have a point, because these are serious issues that can damage lives. So it's it's entirely legitimate to criticize feminism, and one of the biggest problems I have with feminism is the fact that as a movement it arrogantly believes it's above criticism. It's not. But you don't need to be a feminist to believe in women's rights. That's the point I'm trying to make here. I staunchly believe in women's rights. I believe in men's rights and I believe in human rights. You know, just because you're an anti-feminist doesn't mean that you have to always be on this war path against feminism. You can balance out some of that time by acknowledging that there are problems, and in fact I think that would be a very powerful force, by acknowledging a neutral platform where you're dealing with men's issues, but also acknowledging that women's issues exist, and then saying something like, I'm not a feminist. Now, there's an increasing number of women celebrities who are coming out and saying they don't call themselves feminists. I think that's wonderful. I think it's great that these women have egalitarian attitude. So data is Selma Hayek. She was attending a women's and girls' rights seminar, but she openly said that she's not a feminist. Of course, she got vitriol from the feminist movement, which is very intolerant of dissent. But the point is, she was attending a women's and girls' rights seminar. So the point I would like to make is, you can support women's rights without being a feminist. And one of the things I cannot stand about the feminist movement is they talk about, oh, it's all about free choice for women, and it's all about not making women to conform to societal pressures, and yet that's precisely what they do. So if feminism really is about giving women independence to decide their own destiny and their own fate, then they should respect the right of women who don't want to identify themselves as feminists. And the feminist movement doesn't respect those women at all. In fact, if a woman comes out and says, if she's a celebrity, she comes out and says she doesn't identify herself as a feminist, she'll be ridiculed, she'll be attacked, she'll be called subservient, she'll be called stupid, she'll be patronized. We know what happens to men who say that they're against feminism. They get automatically branded a misogynist. Now, in some cases they are misogynistic, but in many other cases, myself included, the exact opposite is true. I love women, I respect women, and I believe in women's rights. I also just happen to oppose the double standards, hypocrisy, and divisive approach of modern Western feminism. So it is not a case that you have to be a feminist to believe in women's rights. And if there's one thing I want to get out with this video, that is it.